child neglect workshop, and it's for managers, supervisors, safeguarding and practice leads. We've been doing these briefing sessions over a period since the child neglect resource and scales have been launched. And it's very important that I introduce as well our speakers today. So I'm Claire McConaughey and I'm Safeguarding Coordinator for the LSCP, and also speaking today is Rachel Hunt, and she is the Training Officer for the LSCP, Training and Development. And yeah, we'll be emailing out to you after this session, and again, as I've just said, we're recording it so we can put it and access to this briefing, so that will be available. And if there's anything that people have shared today in the meeting, we'll gather that together as well and share that out in email. So yeah, thanks ever so much for coming today. So this briefing is going to focus on 3 areas. The first, we'll be looking at using the child neglect resource and scales and supporting those families that we work with, and supporting staff through management to learn through case discussions as well. And then we'll be looking at how the resource and scales can be used to encourage learning and development. And we'll focus on a few areas, so chronology work, and using the term neglect as well, really. We wanted to focus on that a little bit today. These are key areas as well that are coming out of rapid reviews. And we also want to encourage on the call using the chat where possible. We would really encourage people to share practice examples and engage with today's session. It's an interactive session, and we'd really like to gather anything that's shared today to help others. So thanks ever so much for that in advance. So moving on, just wanted to give a bit of a background and the journey of the child neglect resource and scales and the work that's been carried out, including the context of the work, really. So just working through this timeline, we've had some learning reviews that have identified child neglect. We've carried out a child neglect audit. There's been some consultant work that's been carried out, which resulted in the launch of the resource and scales in December 2024. We also developed some other learning, so the police pocket guide was introduced, and there was some sessions that were completed with the police as well around that. So April to now, there's been several briefings that we've put together. There's been also last summer, or the beginning of the summer, we had a briefing that within the Child Safeguarding Week that was carried out by Jane Whiffin, and those on the call may know that that was the work that had helped bring some of the resource together, and Jane's been part of some discussions in our development journey. And then yeah, so as I've said, we had the police sessions that were delivered after the booklet was made, and we've been. Oh, sorry, I keep on getting the pingings in front of the slides. Okay. Just bear with me 1 second. It's about the child neglect, a further child neglect audit that's also highlighted how we are understanding child neglect, but really wanting to move into some of those responses around child neglect. And we've just recently renewed our child neglect strategy, and we'll just share some of that a little bit today as well. So yeah, just wanted to spend a little bit of time really on some of those reviews that I talked about at the start of the journey. This child neglect nationally and locally comes up in a lot of learning reviews, and we just want to share with you Willow, and you can see that there's a link on here. So these are accessible through Enable, and also Rachel is sharing the sways. Willow was a 16-year-old girl, and there was a history of neglect with all the children. Willow was a very sensitive, determined and passionate girl. Outwardly, she presented as quiet and not approachable, but she craved attention, a connection and acceptance and love. So just really wanted to sort of highlight really just some of the lived experiences for these children, and just some important learning points. The work that we've done was around self-harm and suicide patterns, and just to know that there was sin involvement and tack. So these are learning experiences across the piece as well. So they're really important that bulletins are maybe accessed, understood within teams and colleagues that you're working with. It's another way of maybe developing that practice and ensuring that we're thinking about lessons that we can learn. And yeah, just to talk a little bit about Freddie. He wasn't well known to services. He had very limited contact with professionals during his short life. When he was last seen by the health visitor, she described him as growing well, holding his head up and smiling, and Mum was seen to be holding him with care during the visit. He was 9 months old and he was the youngest of 6. And this was a family that had moved to different locations. Again, this was covering child protection, child in need, and TAC. So there's learning for everybody there. There was evidence of child neglect. This was interwoven with experience of domestic abuse, which is covered in the child neglect resource and scales. There was concealed pregnancy. And unfortunately, it was a health complication that Freddie had died from. But again, we just encourage people to take time to look at these experiences of the children, and see where that learning is relevant to your service and your agencies. All the chats are in there. I just wouldn't mention about the concealed pregnancy. There has been recently a national piece of work that's been carried out, and that's got lots of learning there around the trauma of adults and what can be done at that very early preventative stage. So anyone working where there's been removal, for instance, or a person that's been known to services and they become pregnant or could become pregnant, that just encourages a lot of thinking and reflection. So I would encourage people to have a little look and keep an eye out for learning around that will be coming out in Lincolnshire as well. Oh yeah, thanks Rachel. That's really good to put the concealed pregnancy link in there. These will go out in email as well when we send out the presentation. Anything that we think of including in the chat, just to remind you, and putting one access point for you. So some of the learning points to go further into the reviews, we just wanted to highlight. So the visibility of all the children. It was just understanding around Freddie that it was difficult because of Freddie's age, but understanding of the home condition of all the children. And there was some presentation of injuries sustained by the school-age children. So it was just really just to highlight that area of practice that actually that could have been triangulated and brought some things to light for Freddie. And then we've got parental behaviours. So just something that's been raised with us and that we've been doing a piece of work on is around the substance use. Oh yeah, thanks Rachel. Yeah, so we've got as well, we have got some work that have been carried out in terms of making assessments, and we've got policy around medication as well. But it would just be to help people understand around substance use and where the risks are and how to help families be protective around children. And just having those conversations, and we'll talk a bit more about that today around difficult conversations and bringing up conversations and how they can feel uncomfortable, but the importance of doing so. We've got disguised compliance as well. So this is about the check and the challenge, sort of staying in that space of being supportive whilst respectfully curious. So that's highlighted in the report. So this has been part of how the child neglect resource has been built, and how the briefings have covered these subjects. And then, yeah, just the assessment of child neglect. So it's understanding all those different sort of areas of the important areas of child development and the care that is being received. So the scales, just as a quick reminder, just focuses on those parenting areas, and then it gives where the needs of the child are met, or unmet. So it just gives you a bit of a sliding scale around that. And that's why those have been designed. And then we've got the inclusivity in multi-agency meetings. So just making sure that we've got all our partners around the table, including adult services. And again, we'll touch on that in the session today. Yeah, so we just want to say where we're at right now and where we're going. So this is one of the many briefings that have been taking place and will take place.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? I can't see the slides. Can I just check that everyone else can see the slides? Yeah, okay.
Got a thumbs up?
Me. I'll see if I can support with the other technical issue. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, okay, thank you. Right, so yeah, we've been doing activities throughout. I don't know, this is actually the second sort of management aimed briefing that we've completed. We thought it was maybe a good chance, an opportunity to feedback. There'd been the as I said, another audit of child neglect, and we was evaluating where we were in the journey, and this has come as a result of that, really, today's session, and that's why we're covering some of the aspects of learning and development today. So in the future, we're going to be holding a conference on child neglect. I believe, I don't know much more details than that, so again, it's watch this space. Just we're continuing to develop the resource and the scales, and we've often had areas of practice. So recently we had young carers and an education briefing, and that was because of updates to the scales and the resource, and there was a new resource area around young carers that was introduced to the child neglect resource. So yeah, so just to say, if you do have any suggestions, or it really is Lincolnshire's resource, and that means it's your resource, so you really can feed into it, and we can have those discussions, and we really value people's input and opinion. It's something that we want to continue to do, to put these briefings together as well. So again, it would be maybe if you wanted to get involved in that as well, we would be looking to build sessions where people have got ideas and want to get involved. We have our own newsletter, and we do regularly update in there, including publicising when we've got the briefings, and we've seen other areas where they've got newsletters also encouraging use of the child neglect resource and scales, and we just want to put a shout out and a request today that these things are considered as we go forward, and it keeps we keep on having those opportunities to talk about child neglect in Lincolnshire. Yep, I just wanted to share the visual here. So these are just to remind everybody, there's two main documents. So we've got the child neglect resource. This is an 80+ page document, and it focuses on two areas. So understanding and responding to, it's sectioned off. It talks about, it moves through signs of the types of neglect, causal factors, and just how it can link to assessments. So, and then it also has the links to how to respond, maybe if there's an area of practice in the understanding neglect, and then that is within a family that you're working with and supporting. There's actually a responding section that's got lots of useful links in there, including the training, policies that are relevant to that area of practice, and also other sort of services even that you could direct families to be using, and it's just reminders of all those key areas of practice that touches upon child neglect and areas of child development and child care. The scales, these were developed to assist with talking with each other and with children and families, and the language is written to the family. So when we're talking and thinking about where the needs are being met, and where we're putting it on the scale, that we can have those conversations and show families directly, but also we could also use the language within the scales to explain and use within the assessment, the early help assessment, and it will inform plans directly from there. And at the end of each section there is a set of questions that just helps bring that area of care together and really helps sort of focusing on anything that's going really well as well, and things that we need to bolster, the positives, and also just maybe talking through some of those areas that could be kind of difficult where the family don't agree with us, for instance. So it's just encouraging to record differences in opinion. It can also be used, as I say, with the professionals that are involved. So again, it's just about having those conversations, and if you're sort of wanting to explore differences again, it's a good way maybe to sort of say why you're in a certain way of thinking, and just come to some understanding of each other's position. The child neglect resource, as I said, was focused on the Jane Whiffen work, and please do go see Jane's briefing. It was recorded in the Child Safeguarding Week, and that is on the LSCP resource page. And the areas of practice are really set out here for you. But I suppose the main thing we want to really sort of point to is the section in the middle here, that's the impact on the child and how all roads lead back to thinking about what is going on here. So we can be thinking about the family, the wider context, the environment, if you're thinking about the child assessment framework. But what we really want to be thinking of is just what is the plan, but again, what is the lived experience of the child, and is that moving on, and the impact of the child is really important regardless of a mission and commission, for instance. Just thinking about where the intentions of that care is. It's sometimes thinking about really, is this sustainable for this child, and what needs to happen in order to make this child safe, and having a good experience, and having the development that they need. So just to go over as well the child neglect resource as a training and development tool. It's different from anything that we've had. Usually it would be an area of practice, an e-learning, maybe an e-learning combination, face-to-face training. It would be an evaluation of that training experience, and then we would be sort of seeing how many people we've trained, and those sorts of things. With the child neglect resource, what we wanted to do was have a guide that would grow with us, and would keep current practice up to date, really, and that would be useful both in just refreshing ourselves, and just getting that language shared together. So we really want to encourage the breaking down of the child neglect resource in biteable sort of chunks, really, and that's where you guys are really valuable and important to us as a resource, in terms of really just helping embed the use and embed the ideas that are in here. So the resource can be used independently and as support for training and development by services. Each section of the resource can be used in training or supervision. The exercises and discussions can be held around individual pages or themes highlighted. You might want to focus on sessions and types and signs of child neglect. You might want to have sessions that look at the tools and the resources, setting smart targets. These are all included, and they're easily navigatable with a contents page. You can have reflective discussions, and there's prompts within there. It's encouraging teams to use the resources and exercises during reflection in practice. and being applied to real life practice. So, you know, when you have got those cases where child neglect is, you know, just to have that muscle memory of going back to the child neglect resource and maybe looking at that contents page together and really navigating from there and really getting used to sort of finding areas within the resource that are going to be helpful to you. Yeah, just reflection and development, just and how it's supporting practice in your service area as well. So I think that's maybe where it can be used with individual case discussions, but then in wider discussions in the team about how it sits in the service. And I think we've been doing some work recently around some action plans as well. So some people, I think children's services maybe, there's been some discussion around how the embedded learning can be put into specific teams. So yeah, that would be encouraged as well. As part of just after the launch and during those initial stages, we put together this document, and it was again just to help navigate and sort of lay out really at a glance where some of these reflections or case studies have been placed. So really this would be, if you are considering putting a piece of supervision together or a learning exercise, you could use this document to plan any sessions that you have planned, and just really sort of understand just where those just really quickly navigate where those things are in the resource. So I'll show you the example. So what we've got is a column that's sort of describing what the learning experience would be, and then you can also see the slide, the relevant slide to find it within the resource. So we hope think this is useful for you, and something that you access. We did send out the link with the sway for this session today, just to get people maybe just to familiarise themselves with this document, and because it's a link and it's to Canva, what we'll be doing is looking at access to that, LSCP evaluate just who's accessing and how things are being accessed. So it will be part of our evaluation of how child neglect resources are being used in Lincolnshire. So we just encourage people to share this and open this and have some use of it. And then I think when the audit was taking place, it was we were looking at how the child neglect resource and scales are being used, and if people wanted maybe a little bit more about how it fits with assessments, and sometimes assessments are different from the early help assessment, and we're more than happy to talk to people. We've done this before about how it can sit in guidance or prompts for other assessments. They might be written in a different way, written to children, for instance, not the adults. So we've been doing a bit of work around that as well. But within the child neglect resource itself, you can see page 34 to 42 covers what the child neglect resource and scales. It covers the scales, sorry. So this is a breakdown of what the evaluation questions are asking, and really just examples of how to use that. So that's where you can find the area. And I'll just give people a quick reminder of this contents page. It is interactive, so all of these are hyperlinks and they will go directly to the place that you need to be. And then when you get to the place, on each slide there is a little button that has got a home on it, and it can take you back to this slide. So really you can dip in and out of it, and you should be able to sort of go back to the beginning again if you've lost track of where you are in the resource. So this is an example page of where we're talking about the scales evaluation questions. So at the scales in the areas of care at the end, as I've said before, there's some just some reflective questions that should help bring things together. So you can see these along the bottom. So what is the parent carer's view, as I've mentioned, and if you agree or not. Just the impact on each of the children. So it's just a reminder there as well about just thinking about expanding that assessment out for each child. And maybe some of those circumstances preventing parental care, so some of those barriers. So each one of those would be broken down into the question, the context, and the example. And here we've got the first one we're just going to show today is the example around what's working well and what are the worries. So it's the context is that we want to be able to put areas where we want to celebrate, acknowledge, and share with the family and talk about, and then also maybe also some of those scales would also reflect, even in the same area of care, maybe some other areas where we'd like to make some changes and support. So yeah, we're just using the example there around the food and the essential needs and if they're met or not. And it was just to sort of highlight some of those examples around what do we mean when we're talking about those essential needs, and it just breaks down, so we can really sort of measure and map out and put those SMART targets, and this is really seen as a supportive tool to help really target where our plans are going. Right, so that's enough of me talking. I believe, just bear with me 1 second, because yeah, no, that's fine. I was just trying to sort of see where we had time wise, and how much time we might have for this exercise. But if you could just use chats for us and just reflect on some of these questions here. We'd really like to sort of hear examples, and again it's about sharing and you sort of supporting each other today, really. So if we could just have from people around the knowledge and understanding knowledge and gaps within teams and staff, what might be influencing practice, and how to encourage open discussions and learning and development within teams as well. So this can be wider than child neglect, but it's just to get started really about how this is taking place already. Oh, that's good to know. Thank you. I'm glad it's been useful to and it's been shared. That's great to hear. All right, yeah, so the logs are helping staff knowledge gaps. Helpful to show staff knowledge gaps. It can highlight what they do and do not know. Right, okay, so that might be about regularly sort of going into those recordings. So that's and then maybe just evaluating that and taking some actions from that. I suppose that would be either individual or group exercise, because it could be that you see that more than once potentially. Oh, thanks for all of these. These are really great. We will share some of these in the email, and we always will put them together, and we feed back, don't we, Rachel, when we're getting some ideas and things like that, and how this is gathering the picture. Oh, so yeah, I can see there that there's been an action plan going forward, so that's great. Oh, it's on the agenda for the next full team meeting. Thank you. Oh, there's loads. Oh, thank you. Oh, thanks for putting all this in the chat and typing it out. I know it takes a few minutes, doesn't it, to get those fingers typing. Brilliant. So there's review work going on. Yeah, those action plans are coming thick and fast. So I'll be looking forward to looking through some of those. I think they're being gathered within the LSCP. So we'll be going through them, and yeah, we really appreciate the work that's been going into this. Oh, that's lovely as well. Really good. Yeah, on sort of pointing out that curiosity, the presentation, how you're supporting. Because yeah, we're acknowledging that you're not going to have that direct use in your own practice directly with families and children, but this is about supporting those that do. Technologies, yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so as they may still be coming in now, but I'm going to be saying to Rachel now to take over, and I'll be admitting people. Thank you.
No worries. I think I have got control now. Oh, hold on.
No, just hold on. I tried to admit somebody, and it took
okay.
over. It took control instead. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I've got it now. No, not a problem. So for anyone that wasn't here earlier, Claire did introduce me, but I am Rachel Hunt. I'm the Training and Development Officer for the Safeguarding Children Partnership and the Safeguarding Adults Board. And I've been kind of part of the team that was developing the resource and the scales. So we had a lot of work that went into that, like Claire said, and obviously part of the team that now kind of continues to focus these briefings. So I'm just going to kind of talk you through the next section, which does follow up a little bit on that activity that we've just done. And what we wanted to do was kind of talk people through three main areas in terms of where you might be thinking, kind of assessing maybe where your staff are. So if you're a manager and you're supporting staff, maybe understanding some of those key points a little bit further. But also if you are, a safeguarding lead, or even if you're just a colleague and you're offering advice to people, it's still really useful to kind of think about these things from what we've highlighted as kind of three different perspectives. So just to focus on step one, and that really relates to that question where we've looked at kind of how do you look at development within your team, what support people might need, and kind of what knowledge gaps there are. So we've highlighted a couple of these areas, and what we'd always encourage people to do is kind of take that time to pause and reflect. I think it's also useful for us to pause and reflect about our own development, support and knowledge gaps that we might need, and maybe where kind of your other staff members might be at, and kind of some of those gaps. And I guess it's really nice to see that lots of people have kind of group learning activities, and those kind of things are really supportive in terms of exploring that wider team. So it's about kind of how do we encourage the staff that we're working with to feel curious about their own values and approach. I think one of the things that we have found when we've been working around child neglect and developing our resources is it's really difficult compared to other types of abuse. So where you've got physical abuse, it's really quite obvious what that is. Child neglect can be really small incidents that accumulate over time. It can be really challenging to identify what those elements are. And I think actually everyone has their own background and their own understanding of parenting and their own upbringing. So there's a wider kind of threshold of what some people might find acceptable and others don't. So I think it's really important that we kind of challenge people's values and understandings around that. And part of the work that we've done is to ensure that we've got a Lincolnshire specific approach. So where Claire's been talking about the neglect scales, that has been specifically designed to kind of give a bit of a benchmark example. So where you've got, maybe you might be going into a home environment, and I know when I've spoken to police colleagues before, it's really difficult when people have a different understanding about what environment might be acceptable for a child to live in. And we're not saying where it's really extreme and obviously a child is unsafe. It's maybe some of those smaller elements that people might notice, but in having that conversation with their colleague, it's really clear that maybe they're on different understandings of where a child should live or what they should have access to. So I think the scales have really encouraged a shared understanding around that, and allowing not only the discussion with a family, but also enabling a discussion with a colleague too. And I think one of the things that we would encourage you to do outside of the directed tasks that are in the resource is maybe, even if you're not familiar with the scales, you've not used them in your team, is maybe printing them off, having them available in a team meeting or even in a supervision to look at kind of what is that benchmark. And while it's not an exhaustive list, it doesn't give all examples of every single type of child neglect. It does give a format and a structure to kind of what we would be expecting that people do to meet a child's needs. And I think that's one of the difficult areas maybe to work with your staff and your colleagues on that basis, that people have different experiences and different understandings, and when it's really extreme it's really clear, but often with child neglect it can be really tricky, and we do need a multi-agency response, and we do need a bit of a standardized area to be focusing on. So I think one of the main things that we would say is obviously think about and reflect on how might we have those conversations about different values, different approaches, without, you know, making people feel like they're judged, because it can be a real challenge in moving that conversation forward. And I would absolutely recommend looking at the scales as a starting point. The other thing that we would recommend is kind of actually thinking about, you know, your staff, your colleagues, what experience do they bring with them? What experiences have they had themselves? But also, you know, what families have they worked with? What's worked well in the past? And I think we just encourage actually just having those conversations with our colleagues, particularly when, you know, people are coming to you to seek advice. We don't all have the exact answer. So what we would say is the resource and the scales have been designed for people to look at together. You can use it by yourself individually, and you can encourage the people to go away and pick up some learning if there's maybe some gaps. But what I would definitely say is it's also something that you can draw on as a tool. If someone comes to you with a question or a concern, you might not both know where to go with it, but we would absolutely say, look at the resource. Is there something there around that theme? Is there a link within the scales that explore kind of a little bit more about how you might explore that with a family? It might also link to additional resources that might help. So definitely think it's something to go with. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, actually, that the scales will help with a fresh pair of eyes, because I think sometimes, and we will kind of come on to that, with child neglect, things can kind of go on for quite some time. And as much as, you know, we absolutely do not want to be thinking, well, that's kind of how that is with that family. We know that some people think, well, that's just that family, that's how this is. And I think the scales really give a structure to kind of actually draw back and say, well, if we're looking at it like this, they're not meeting the child's needs, and we always need to keep that child in the centre of what we're thinking. So it's just to say that I think utilising the documents help people to think a little bit wider. Not only can they be used for your own knowledge, so there are elements within it where we've highlighted different causal factors that might contribute to child neglect. And it might be that it's something you've never worked with before. So we've got stuff in there about substance use. And, you know, it might be something new that you've kind of never thought about or you've never come across. You might be brand new in your role. So we've kind of put clear pages together that respond to some of those key themes and some of those key areas that hopefully encourage those open conversations and learning. And the other really important thing, and I think we shared those learning bulletins earlier, and they are local teacher learning. But what I would say as well, you know your service, your teams, your area that you work in the best. And I think we had the comment earlier about actually identifying those themes from multiple supervisions or multiple conversations. I know sometimes there's, you know, some settings that say we're seeing a lot of domestic abuse at the moment. So talking about that with your teams, thinking, okay, we're getting this theme, what do we need to do about it? There's lots of training involved. There's lots of stuff in the resource that you can have a look at. And like Claire said, it's, you know, it's really different to our usual training approach. E-learning and face-to-face courses have their place, but I think with child neglect, it's so complex and it's so tricky that we wanted to create something that people could access videos, they could access text, they could access research, they could look at case studies, and they could be directed to undertake some of the learning. So yeah, just to say, there's a few key points there that we would advocate that people take it on, either if you're a manager with your staff, but also if you're a safeguarding lead, you're a supervisor, or even with your other colleagues. So I know, you know, often I would turn to my other colleagues to think, what can I do here? I'm really stuck. And we would advocate that the resource and the scales is there for those stuck cases, those conversations. So don't feel that as a colleague you can't direct that conversation either. We would say absolutely use it however it fits for you and your team. So just to say some additional things that we've pulled together, and people might be familiar with some of these resources and kind of tools, is that if you've not heard of them, we would say go away and have a look, but they're really useful in terms of encouraging conversation, and not just around child neglect. I think it's wider around practice. So I don't know if people have seen some of these reflective supervision tools, but Siobhan McLean, she's got lots of different approaches. So some of it is kind of written reflection, but others are kind of visual reflection. So we know people learn differently and people might like different models. So it's just to say they encourage kind of reflection and thinking about learning and thinking about how to move things forward. Also, something that's really, really important is exploring wider influences, values and ethics. And while we've said there about all of us come from different backgrounds, different places, so we've all got our own understanding of the world, I think we also know that we work with families who have that same background. And if people have seen the social graces or the wheel of privilege, but they are some models that help us to have those conversations with people, but also might help us to sit back and reflect on some of our own biases. And I think everyone has their own biases. It's just about understanding what they are and I guess what impact that might be having on some of our approaches, some of our feelings, how we might be responding to certain situations. And we would encourage you to go away, have a look at those. But also, I've been involved in kind of using those within some training exercises that I've done, and they do really help you sit back and reflect. I'm not going to lie, sometimes they might lead to some challenging conversations and some people reflecting and maybe feeling that they've maybe never thought about that before, or maybe you learning something about a colleague that you've never known before. But I think they're important conversations for us to have and for us to move forward with understanding where people come from. So I'd always advocate to think about that. Yeah, definitely challenges feelings. And then learning and development. So there's just some additional tools there to think about. Learning and development action plans. So whether you do those within your own services, I'm sure you'll all have kind of directed learning, things that you have to do within your agency. But just to point out that there's some useful tools there that you might want to look at in supervision, or even think about for yourself if you've not had kind of those learning and development structures. And then we just wanted to share some examples from practice. So it's really lovely when we get feedback from people about kind of how they've used the neglect resource and the neglect scales. We ran a similar workshop, maybe a similar time last year, for managers, designated safeguarding lead and supervisors. And we kind of asked for some of their feedback about actually what they've done since they went away from the briefing. So we've got a couple of things which are quite similar to what people have shared in the chat actually. So delivered a staff meeting and introduced all of the staff to the scales, talked about the different areas of neglect and linked those concerns with their own families. And I think that was one of the things that we really wanted to do in designing the resource, is that you can link that to your own practice. It's relevant to everybody, which sometimes is a challenge for multi-agency training. But the resource can absolutely be used by yourselves, by a team, understanding what your families need in your service. Something really good, which I would always advocate for, is talking about the importance of logging even small concerns. So we've had someone mention a chronology earlier. We will be kind of talking a little bit about chronologies. But like I said before, child neglect can often come from small incidents that, you know, sometimes people wait for that trigger incident to make an action. But actually, if you're noting those small incidents over a period of time, it can really bring to light and help people to visualize the risk and the fact that life is not changing for that child. So no matter how small those incidents are, and it might even be, you know, went for a home visit, they weren't in. It could be didn't take someone to a medical appointment, and although they might seem small at the time, if you're getting multiple incidents of that, you can start to think actually this is a pattern. So we'd always advocate for kind of thinking about ways of making sure you're monitoring even those small elements. And you know, if you're seeing small good things as well, that's also really good to record, and you can share that with a family. So another example was around developing knowledge or use of language. So we're going to move on to talking about sometimes people find it really challenging to use the word neglect. And I think people took away last time quite a good action of maybe just having that conversation with their staff about how do we feel about it? What is it that's making us feel uncomfortable with naming it? And I think there's lots of things that go into that. I won't go into that because I'll be talking for about 3 hours, but the resource will kind of talk you through that and give you some tips around some of those conversations you can have. We had a really nice example. Claire and I went and delivered, I think it was to LCHS, so to their Safeguarding Champion Forum. A really nice example of someone who was there, and as we were talking through it, she kind of said at the end, now that she'd seen the scales, we've got a section in there which is around love and care. And that is one of the key areas that people find really challenging to respond to, because again, everyone's got their own experience of love and care. And if you're sharing with a family that maybe your understanding of love and care isn't theirs, that can lead to really tricky conversations. And I think often people worry about maybe closing that relationship off with that family when they're getting somewhere. So the member of staff actually said that now she'd seen the scales, the language that was in that scales would really encourage her to have that conversation around love and care. So that was really nice to hear. And then we also got that people were saying they've already got a really good understanding, but that they were able to kind of go away and think how they could have a bit of a benchmark across the school about everyone's shared understanding and standards of care, which is kind of the point I was saying before. So step 2, one of the other things we've said is around kind of thinking wider. So that really is about kind of thinking about how you can identify ways forward with your staff. But I get this is about kind of actually identifying challenges and gaps in knowledge. So we've highlighted a few key things here, and we have linked into the learning reviews. So if you may be finding that there's a bit of a challenge, or you're not getting anywhere with supporting your staff or your team, what we would say is look at our rapid reviews, our learning bulletins, because they kind of shift it away from talking about specific practice or specific cases that people might be dealing with, and they highlight key learning. And we've shared Freddie and we've shared Willow, which have got learning around child neglect. You will see that a lot of our learning bulletins have learning around child neglect, and you will also see that pattern nationally. So it's not necessarily something Lincolnshire specific. It just shows that there is a need for kind of this approach and us to be supporting people with understanding such a complex topic. So we would obviously say, look at the reviews, have the conversations around that, explore the recommendations and think about, is that relevant for your team? Is there a way that you can implement that learning? Maybe even, it depends how big your team is, but we've had things where we kind of bring things to team meetings, and it could be that you allocate, a learning bulletin to someone in the team and ask them to go away and have a think about how they're going to bring this learning and what they're going to talk about with the staff. So it's just about being creative to kind of embed the learning and move forward with it. As we always hear, another common theme, being professionally curious. So again, using the scales to explore things from a different perspective is really useful. Always thinking about, what's going on for the child, what's going on for the family, but would also encourage you, if you've not seen the professional curiosity resource pack that we have developed, I think it's been around for quite a number of years. We will be reviewing it soon to update it, but that is also aimed at kind of utilising the tool in discussions. So it's got some cases, it's got case studies, there's key kind of questions you might encourage your staff to be thinking about. So again, would encourage you to think about maybe incorporating that into some of your conversations. Thinking about common themes. So we highlighted that before in terms of if you're seeing a lot of, I think, lots of people are seeing a lot of poverty, a lot of challenge with the cost of living and how people are living, and things actually just becoming a norm now. I think it's really important to not just accept them as a norm, although I know it's hard to think about how actually are we responding to this. But just having those conversations, using the scales, thinking about how we can move something forward for a child and for a family, and also looking at wider reports as well. So I did share that report that I think was published last month, that Claire mentioned earlier. So kind of just being on the point and thinking about, what reviews are coming out, and often those reviews have some really good kind of key questions and reflective questions that you might want to think about. And I think it's something that we've started thinking about putting in our learning bulletins as well, to give people some reflective points that they can take away. So again, I would just encourage you to think about, how can I use those with my staff? How can I use those in conversations in supervision? If you're offering advice to anyone about a safeguarding concern, how can you use those to bring out actually what's going on? So just encourage you to have a look at those. And again, I've mentioned before about using the word neglect. It can be really challenging. Yeah, we need to be confident with identifying child neglect and communicating it clearly, but that doesn't mean it's not a challenge. And it's really hard to be honest with families and use that terminology, particularly, like I said, where you've got those small accumulation of things. It's really challenging. And like I said, the scales have been designed to encourage a supportive, strengths-based approach and conversation with families. Evidencing worries and accumulative nature of child neglect. So like I said, it requires a collation and analysis of those small, seemingly insignificant events that actually, once it's written down on a chronology, or you come together and have a multi-agency meeting, once you start to piece it all together, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I've not necessarily thought about it this way before. So always encouraging you to think about, okay, I need to map this, I need to have this visual, I need to think about, what is that child experiencing, and how long has it been going on for? Even those small elements, they have a lifelong impact on children. So some of the challenges, as I've mentioned, child neglect and the persistence of it. So it is something that, occurs over a long period of time. It's really prevalent, and as I've mentioned, as is poverty. It doesn't mean that, any people experiencing poverty will always neglect their children. It's just that one of those areas of the resources around kind of those causal links, and we do have something there around intersectionality and thinking wider about actually what might be happening for this family. As I mentioned before, often we can kind of look for that trigger incident and think about, okay, this is, really serious now. I need to make a referral. And I think, it is really hard because, we've got lots of people on the call that will probably be thinking, well, I want to make a referral earlier on, and maybe, it's not getting accepted. What I would encourage you to do is look at the scales. Think about making sure if you've got a chronology, sharing every single piece of information on that call if you're making a referral, using the language, because when we pulled the scales together as a partnership, we worked with Children's Services, we worked with all of our partners to ensure that there'd be a shared language, that, if something was going into the front door, if a referral was going in, that language was being used, it's clear on the other end that, the person you're referring to knows the scales, they know what you're referring to, they understand that level of risk. So that was another one of the reasons that we kind of wanted to bring the scales into being, so that actually not only have you got a shared language with families, you've got a shared language with other professionals who can understand that risk from maybe not seeing that child every day. So would encourage you, absolutely share all the information you have. If you've got a chronology, share everything and use the language in the scales as well. So yeah, around there kind of being a gap once that's identified. So again, like we've said, it can be really challenging with neglect, and I suppose it leads on from that conversation really about, you might be seeing that child every day and thinking, I know this is neglect, it's not going anywhere, nothing's changing, feeling a bit powerless and not knowing what to do with it. I think the resource and some of the tasks and support within there hopefully really help people with that feeling. And I know from some of the feedback we've had, people have really said, it's really helped where you've been stuck with a case. It's helped make a change in terms of practice, or think about actually what's a different approach we can use here. And again, recognising and acting on child neglect where there is also poverty, and being clear about the impact to the child. Again, it's that real big challenge, isn't it, about understanding that someone's experiencing poverty and, being trauma informed in our approach, but also knowing that there's an impact on that child. And, like we've said, it's always about the child and what is life like for them, and is anything changing. And I think one of our learning bulletins, one of the learning points was around kind of actually a lot of focus being on those big things. So I think there was the fact the home conditions weren't great. There were a lot of concerns around that, and actually there was kind of a consistent response of, well, we'll be moving house soon. And I think the response to that, quite understandably, was kind of, oh, well, once they've moved house, maybe that will change. But actually that house move didn't happen. That child was experiencing those home conditions for a really significant time, and it did result in a child death. It is one of our learning bulletins, so I would encourage you to go and have a look at that. So I think, we're always optimistic as practitioners, and, if we're hearing that and we're thinking, absolutely, that's a big thing, that's going to solve this when they move, but it's also about that balance of, okay, how many times have we had that as they're going to move, this is happening, and how long has that child continued to experience this? So some of those questions that we need to kind of keep just in the front of our mind about, you know, is life changing for that child really important? Something else that we've included in the resource and the scales is around older children, and there kind of being a lower detection and action regarding child neglect. And I think it might be due to adultification. I don't know if people are aware of that, but that's kind of that term around actually similar to when we call children young people. There's sometimes a judgment that, you know, as a young person, they might have a better understanding of the world, and which they may do, but they're still children, and they're still kind of growing up in that environment, and it still impacts them the same as it would, you know, a younger child. So it's about us always kind of challenging that, but also acknowledging that there are added complexities when you're working with older children, and that kind of links to some of that harm outside the home, and thinking about contextual safeguarding, and, you know, safeguarding where it doesn't necessarily happen in the home. So one of the areas of the scales that we have is around safety and supervision. So that might be around, you know, the neglect of knowing where your child is, the neglect of maybe not knowing what they're doing online, not understanding actually the impact of harm outside the home, and some of the contextual safeguarding stuff that's occurring outside of the home. So again, we've got a big section on that in the resource. So it's always about thinking wider, thinking about actually what might be causing this. And we've just put a link in there to the report that some of these themes come from. So that's the Too Little Too Late report, which is from the NSPCC. But there's also a podcast that talks through some of those key points as well. So again, would encourage you to kind of take some time to have a bit of a think about those further, or share it with your staff, ask them to have a little bit of a listen or think about some of those key themes. So this is a screenshot from the resource. I'm not expecting you to read it all. So I know it's a really busy slide, but what we wanted to do was give you a bit of an overview. If you've not seen the resource, we have separated it into areas like Claire showed you before. But as we said, one of the things that's really challenging is using that word neglect. So we've got a number of things within here that can support with that conversation. It can support with encouraging your staff to go away and have a think about that more. And you'll see within the resource where we've got a directed learning task or like a reflective exercise, we've got that little image there of those three people kind of doing some questions. So you'll see those throughout the resource, and they can encourage you to just kind of structure some of the conversation around that. The next couple of slides are quite busy because they're screenshots. So again, this is a screenshot of the scales. So you will see that they are separated into areas. So you'll see this one is the safety and supervision area. And you'll see they're split up in the supervision section. They're split up by age, because as I said, it will be different for different ages of children in terms of what we expect. So you'll have like a good example over here of what it looks like if all the child's needs are being met. We have included some additional resources. So some of that can be shared with parents. So if you're having those conversations, you're not sure kind of where to have those conversations or what to talk about, some of the resources in there can support, but you can also share those with the parents and carers to encourage them to go away and have a think about it. And you'll then see that they are set out in kind of colours. So you've got most essential needs met, most essential needs unmet, and then essential needs entirely unmet or disregarded. So there is a different approach in all of those. And the scale, what people have been using, actually saying what it's really good for, is also setting goals with a family. So you might start working with a family where, you know, something's in the red and you're really concerned, but what you can actually do is use the language in the other areas to set goals with the family. But like I said, it's also something you can use to have conversations. So, you know, if you're worried about maybe talking about safety and supervision with a family, you've got a clear benchmark here about actually in Lincolnshire, this is kind of what our understanding is. And you'll see it's written to the parents and the carers as well. So we can absolutely lift those examples. Like I say, it's not an exhaustive list, so you might come across something that's not mentioned in here, but absolutely use the sentences as a structure. So utilise kind of what you're worried about, but maybe use the language. You'll also see at the start of the scales, there's a frequency table, which kind of sets out actually some of the concerns. So I think it says there's a difference between usually, sometimes, and often. So that matches in terms of what goes in the yellow, orange, and red columns. As well, use your professional judgment, because if, for instance, the child is left alone in the care of an unsuitable adult, we wouldn't say that needed to happen frequently. That's a one-off. If that's happening, that's an immediate safeguarding concern. So you'll see there's obviously some professional judgment to use within it, but it will give you some examples. And again, everyone's got their own understanding of safety and supervision, so this really helps with some of those conversations. And just to give you an idea there, that's the supervision in the 11 to 18 section. So it'll have different examples of what you should be focusing on and what parents should be thinking about as well. So it supports with kind of that harm outside the home aspect. So really just would encourage you to go away, take a look if you've not seen them, or if you want to utilise them, as I would say, in supervision, or even get them out for a team day, a team chat to have a think about, how might these help with our assessments and our conversations with families. So just another example of what's in the resource. So as I mentioned before, around that kind of poverty element and it being really difficult to kind of find that balance. As I mentioned, we've got responding to environment and intersectionality. So that also will talk about kind of adultification. It's got links to the social graces that I spoke about earlier, maybe understanding culture, religion, different aspects that we need to be thinking about and asking about. So you'll see that in the resource, it's separated into different areas. So it will link you to some of our training. It might link you to some of the resources we have, but it also might link you to wider kind of tools or research that's happened that can really support with some of that information. So I've spoken for ages now. Again, so another just task for you to have a bit of a think about. So thinking about your team and your agency, how do you understand what your team or colleagues, what their understanding of child neglect is? Are you aware of any patterns that you or your team are seeing relating to child neglect? There's 4 questions, so take your time. If you put in your answer, which one you're answering, that would probably be helpful. And then the 3rd question, so are you aware of any challenges that you or your team are experiencing with making meaningful change for families? And then the 4th one, so the resource and scales, they've been available since December 2024. How well are they being used by your staff and colleagues? And there is no judgment here, so please, please, please be honest, because I think what we want to understand is if people aren't using them or there are challenges, what is it we can do to support people to utilise them? And it's your document in a sense. Yes, it was created in partnership, but we can edit it. It's owned by us. We can add things. We can create briefings that support specific areas. So it'd just be really interesting to hear from you on some of those kind of 4 points. I'll give some time to pop it in the chat. Only used by pastoral lead. Yeah. And sometimes I think that is the approach. You've got your safeguarding lead who might understand things and can then bring that in with kind of discussions. But again, it's entirely up to you or the staff. It might be really useful to say, these are available in Lincolnshire. If they're having a chat with a parent, drop off or something like that, they might be able to utilise some of the language in the scales. But obviously it fits however it fits within your team. And absolutely, scales have provided a very helpful guide. Perfect. Yeah, minimal use of the tool. Yeah, and I think that's something we found in the audit, that although this exists, there's not necessarily been that kind of move on to using it. Education is a big team. Yeah, a training module. And we did think about that, but and I'm not fully against it, or I'm not against it, to be honest. It's just we have such a wide training offer anyway, and child neglect is in everything that we didn't feel that necessarily a child neglect module would bring anything further, but that's not to say it wouldn't, and it's certainly something we can think about. Don't think the tool is used enough, but this, yeah, perfect. Yeah, group learning, that's really good. I don't know if I've missed any other comments in there. I don't know if anyone's got any challenges with the team or experiencing the communication between the team and social services. Yeah, and I think that can be really difficult, isn't it? Because you are working across different agencies. And obviously we would encourage use the scales, be using the language, but it's not perfect. It doesn't always match. I don't know if you are aware, Corinne, of the professional escalation resolution protocol. So we've got in Lincolnshire a professional escalation resolution approach, which all partners have signed up to. So if you are not getting somewhere, or you're not happy with a response you've got, or you want to question that to understand it a little bit more, there is a formal approach which has 4 stages, which has been agreed across Lincolnshire. It has timescales approach associated with it. Yeah, so safeguarding lead supportive. But for anyone else that's not used it, if you ever stuck or you want to explore why a decision's been made, or you're not hearing back about something, we will link the professional resolution escalation policy. Claire, I don't know if you're able to get it, or actually I'm about to finish, so I'll get it in a minute. I'll link it for people if they've not seen it. 2, not yet, but only just beginning to use the scales. Thanks, Claire. Wonderful. No, I really appreciate all of your kind of sharing on that. I'm going to pass back over to Claire for the next bit.
I think it's maybe helpful to maybe think about the evidencing of the worries and the cumulative nature of child neglect now. So the tools, the resource and scales to help with these areas. We wanted to sort of break down sort of 3 areas where this where we think the tools can be really helpful. And we'd like this is an opportunity really to encourage you all to identify and think about those patterns and check out information, encourage further reflection, and really sort of plan ahead to what we need to understand around behaviours when we're thinking about child neglect. So we've identified 3 main areas of this of reflective questions. So the first one is identifying patterns. This is really about helping to explore and look at the picture that's been built. So we're sort of saying around this that it is about discussing those worries, any common themes around neglect, so nationally and locally, how we've been mentioning it, and really how are we evidencing this, and where is that being recorded, how is that being recorded, and who we're sharing it with, and then the checking out information. This is about what life is like and the impact to the child. So really bringing it back to that child focus, and reaching out to fill in the gaps. So once we've sort of looked at what we've got, it's about looking what we haven't got. Sometimes when we're thinking about child neglect, it's important to realise that the child is not responsible for telling us about it, and it's a child is really going to find that very, very difficult to have a comparison of what other care could be, just based on their lived experience. It's really difficult for children to come forward if they are experiencing anything, and so it really is up to us to find the voice of that child. So that is a gap in itself, really, when we think about that. So we want to sort of take an approach that's different. We want to push to understand where we can get this knowledge from. So sometimes that could be an activity that's done way before. That's something that we can prepare for. We can look at just those networks that can support the child and family. So really sort of thinking about who's involved, and really bringing together those targets for the whole family, and making sure everybody understands what's been asked of them. And yeah, just around that cumulative picture, it's considering the risks, and not waiting for trigger points. So it's really thinking about that impact, and just thinking what could this mean for the child, and really sort of exploring that, and it's maybe in the instance now, but it's also maybe projecting that and thinking about what are the impacts that this that this can have on the child. And I think we'd mentioned earlier on about the older child, and sometimes when we're thinking about that older child that we're supporting, it might be that they've experienced something for a long period of time, and they're in a situation where actually that is impacting on how they make their decisions. When they're 16, we've got the mental capacity sort of that brings in some of those experiences. That's what we really need to be including in our assessment at that life stage, is actually what does this mean in terms of how they sort of progress and move into their adulthood. And I think that's been sort of raised as well in terms of the studies, and just that accumulative nature of neglect and how that impacts on the older child if they haven't got the right support about that in the future. We've got just moving through, it's also about understanding those behaviours. So we might want to use the like those ideas of cycle of change. So they're all in the resource, and it's just we just wanted to break that down and maybe think about it in those areas of how to move through. So so we've touched on chronologies. The area of these are the areas of the resource and scales that can support practice. We just want to draw your attention to these today. So it's just really summarising and getting to the point of what we're sort of trying to sort of say today, essentially. So being curious with families and colleagues, and really just helping those trickier areas, as Rachel's just sort of gone through. But it's those it is a really tough space to hold in terms of building relationships that are respectful and may take time, but also sort of balancing that with that are we challenging the rule of optimism. So being aware of the real life experiences and what this really means and what the implications for the child are, bringing it back to that. It could be around exploring the home. So we've talked a little bit today, but it's about who else has got that access if you haven't. It's about what is it telling us. So thinking about those environments, thinking about the environment, and thinking about things like supervision. It's those experiences that we can really draw together, and that's what child neglect is about. It's looking at all 5 areas of care and really making an assessment that is holistic about what that child needs and what their environment is and what parenting they are experiencing, and how we can help. So triangulating. It's about the practical advice as well. So we could be offering how to sort of have those conversations with families, or how to encourage sort of going into different rooms. So this again can be done beforehand, and can be done as part of a team exercise or talking in supervision. We've got just about that. Just that exploring what makes people feel uncomfortable, and consider discussing this in the teams. We've got how we empower people to sort of go further, and just give assurances that it's okay, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing with safeguarding a child. So it is okay to ask more questions, and that would be encouraged and supported. I'm going to be sort of whizzing through the next one, so I do apologise, guys. We'll get there. So this was around the use of chronologies. It's been referred to before by Rachel, but just to say that there's a section in the child neglect resource that sort of focuses on using chronologies, how to evaluate them as well. There's some useful links in here. Just whizzing through to see if I've got anything else I want to say about this. No, I'll just share these. So this is slide 65. So again, this is using research in practice, and you can see our little symbol there for some reflective questions. So this is one of the ones that would be in that resource document that we've sent out around directed tasks. So it's just you can use any one of these on the grid that the research in practice have put together. And these are some areas on slide 51. It's highlighted for encouraging professionals around curiosity. You may want to consider some of these examples to explore. it sort of covers like the poor nutrition, going into fridges and cupboards, etc., and how you can sensitively manage these, you know, or how people feel about that. Just sort of heading off really any of those uncomfortable areas of practice, and really sort of practice may be something that actually desensitizes the practitioner in a way to some of those maybe those uncomfortable feelings, and it is able to sort of break those barriers in terms of practice. And I think we just wanted to talk about the scales here again, really, that actually using the scale document. I think Rachel said about printing it off, but actually maybe just moving people through needs being met and essential needs being met, and just maybe helping people rehearse maybe some of that language, or sort of change it to how people might feel more comfortable using some of the language directly into the assessment. So that could be done as a team activity. And then just those barriers. So we put this in the resource, but it might be something that you want to think about depending on your service remit and your agency remit in terms of where you see that child. We've put something in here. Sometimes it's maybe a challenge or a barrier, a perceived barrier around not seeing that child in the home, and it's just an example really of how we can get that picture, build that puzzle piece, the puzzle pieces together, and look at the whole picture by using other services and our questions and our curiosity about the whole experience of that child. So really sort of reaching beyond the barriers of our own services potentially sometimes as well. So I think we've got a few moments. I'm sorry, I've whizzed through those last ones and maybe not touched on every single point that I wanted to, but just timing wise, we want to get to the end. So again, it's just an opportunity to share together some sort of reflections as well. So we want to just think about when we've used the child scales and neglects to evidence worries, or specifically around maybe the cumulative nature of child neglect, and how we've used the chronologies, if we've got any examples of that are anonymised, that you could share with us today. So I'll give you a few moments to be able to sort of formulate that. That might take a few moments. And then overcoming the uncomfortable nature, exploring child neglect with the family. So if there's any conversations or any thoughts yourself, or ones that you've had within your supervisions, or when discussing this area of practice, what you just think some of those barriers might be, or how you overcome them, just would be really great to have in the chat. So I'll leave you for a few moments.
That's a
So
really good
colouring,
example about, yeah, putting colouring on the themes. It just helps a little
yeah.
bit more with the visualization as well. I think that's a really good example. Thank you.
I think we might be looking at maybe when we're doing a refresh. I know we've mentioned before, but I think there was a conversation recently after the audit, and there might be something we're checking out around another example of a chronology that might be similar to that. So look out for that as well.
Yeah, and just to say as well, if people haven't seen, we did a briefing on chronology specifically related to child neglect. So if people haven't seen that, there is a recording available on the resources site. Claire might be able to get the link for it.
Yeah, that's probably the bit there.
But we did an activity around multi-agency chronologies and actually kind of showing where the gaps were and how that really worked to bring things together. Claire's finding that. I'll just move on. We're almost at the end, so thank you so much for bearing with us. One of the final parts we wanted to share with you. So these are two new documents. So if people were familiar with the threshold document, the previous one, it's been refreshed. We now have a meeting the needs document, or meeting the needs together, which talks through Lincolnshire's framework for supporting families. So it's got all your information in there about how we support families, the approach in Lincolnshire. It also talks around team around family. child in need, child protection, and kind of that whole safeguarding journey. So I would encourage you to have a look at that. We've also just launched a new child neglect strategy, which again moves us on a little bit from some of the work that we've already done, gives us some kind of key actions within Lincolnshire. And just one of the points we wanted to say, so these are our kind of areas that we would like to achieve between 2026 2028, specifically on child neglect. So this is from that the document that I've just shared. So again, some of the key things we've been saying around establish a common standards and approach across all agencies. So hopefully these briefings, the documents we've created will encourage that. But as it's a partnership document and as we've got practitioners on the call, what we're really hoping is that we can kind of ask you to have a think about these 5 areas and actually think about how can we kind of support some of these achievements across Lincolnshire. So how you go away today and think about standardising that approach? So I know people have already said going to go away, share the resource, share the scales, have those conversations, and I think those are really the important things we need people to do. Making sure that we're all able to identify, name and describe child neglect. What I would say is the resource hopefully really encourages and helps people with those areas, and again we are open to feedback. So if there's any gaps, if there's anything people want us to add, again, like I said, that is it's our document. We can add to it as we see fit. Parents and carers are supported to reduce the harm. So again, that's our approach in Lincolnshire. And at the earliest opportunity. So that's about identifying early, making sure you're seeing those small elements as actually key points rather than waiting for a trigger incident. And practitioners have the skills, knowledge and resources to support parents. So again, we would encourage you to have a think about those points and think about how in our service can we kind of do our bit to achieve some of those points. So just a recap of kind of the things we've covered. So we've thought about how we can take stock, think about people's knowledge, think about the themes, think about what resources we can identify and move our team forward with, or move some of our conversations with, thinking about using the resource and the scales, utilising chronologies, ensuring supervision and discussions have some of this kind of emphasis on neglect, and supporting where possible staff knowledge from your wider team and also yourself, I guess. Some key things we always kind of want to say, and we kind of say this at the end of most of our briefings, is we always want to bring the conversation back to the child. So make sure what life is like for them is at the heart of all of your discussions, any advice and support that you're offering. I think we all share that passion and we all want to make sure that's how we're working. Encourage and support the use of the scales, explore it with your practitioners, use it to assist in language, refer to it in supervision, so talk to it as much as possible. You can focus any tasks or future discussions around some of those themes that we said, or go and have a look at the document which talks you through those directed tasks and start to think about, you know, how can I use this within my service? Utilise chronologies and think about having those conversations around naming child neglect and some of the difficulties. And what I would always say is look out for communication on a child neglect conference, which we will be hosting, any briefings, and we will be running again the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Children Week. We hosted last year 3 webinars a day. It's a week in June. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but Claire might be able to access the diary to have a look. So just a reminder to have a look at that. And as well, we have approached taking feedback on this slightly different, because we don't have a training course specifically associated with it. Usually what would happen is we'd ask for evaluation on the course, we'd look at that, we'd make developments. What we've got for the resource and the scales and our briefings is one key evaluation that we pull together all of the themes. And we've, since the launch, which was December 2025, we've only had 31 people fill it in. So you can see we've had 101 people at the briefing today. We know that people are using the resource, and we know that people are coming to our briefings. So I just ask, if you have got 5-10 minutes, please can we ask you to fill that in. Not only is it an opportunity to give us feedback on the briefings, but also on the resource. You also will be asked if there's anything you want us to focus on in the future in terms of briefings. So please do fill that in.